Can we achieve happiness through the stoic approach of emotional indifference? Of course not, don't be silly. The main premise behind the stoic approach to happiness is something like this. Events in the world affect us only through our interpretations of them. So if we can control our interpretations, we can control our world. There may be a little bit of truth behind this, as cognitive therapy and meditation can change the way we think, but only after months of work, which takes high levels of discipline. The fact is though, most people would not benefit from this approach because your way of thinking can't be changed by sheer force of will. The life of cerebral reflection and emotional indifference, advocated by many Stoic philosophers and by the Buddha, are lives designed to avoid passion, and a life without passion is not a life worth living. But can something as complex as happiness be deduced into a formula? These psychologists seem to think so, and it goes a little bit like this. H for happiness equals S, your biological set point. Our interpretations of things largely depend on something psychologists call your affective style, which encompasses whether you're an optimist or a pessimist. Optimists have a high happiness set point, they habitually look on the bright side, and they easily find silver linings compared to pessimists. However, this is largely dictated by genetic factors that are completely out of our control. Twin studies generally show that from 50 to 80% of all variance among people in their average levels of happiness can be explained by differences in their genes rather than in their life experiences. So the first thing that makes up our happiness is completely out of our control. The next factor is C, conditions. Conditions that are uncontrollable, such as age, sex, ethnicity, as well as conditions that are controllable, such as relationship status, amount of money you make, etc. Contrary to Stoic wisdom, there are conditions we should strive for that can bring us lasting happiness. Before we get into them, it's important to understand something called the adaptation principle or hedonic adaptation. Why do we get accustomed to increases in our salaries, a new house, a new car, etc.? Over time, the brain tends to adjust to these pleasurable stimuli through a process known as neuroplasticity. Neurons in the reward circuitry can become desensitized to the same level of stimulation, requiring greater or novel stimuli to produce the same level of pleasure. We are biologically set this way. A human who becomes satisfied with what they have are less likely to seek new and novel things, which would generally improve their chances of survival. The Stoic approach to happiness implies that there is nothing worth striving for because you can achieve happiness and satisfaction without attachments. In the case of material wealth, they're probably right, but in other cases, an increasing amount of evidence says that this is plainly wrong. There are some external conditions that matter that are not subject to the adaptation principle and can cause long-lasting happiness that are worth striving for. Firstly, noise. Research shows that people who must adapt to a new and chronic source of noise, such as construction work, never fully adapt and can be impaired in cognitive tasks. Noise, especially noise that is variable or intermittent, interferes with concentration and increases stress. It's worth striving to remove sources of noise from your life. Commuting. Many people choose to move further away from their jobs, to live in a larger house. But people quickly adapt to having more space, but don't fully adapt to the longer commute, particularly if it involves driving in heavy traffic. Even after years of commuting, those whose commutes were traffic-filled still arrive at work with higher levels of stress hormones. It's worth striving to improve your commute. The next condition is lack of control. One of the active ingredients of noise and traffic, the aspect that really gets under your skin, is that you can't control them. In one study, groups were exposed to loud bursts of random noise. One group were told they could terminate the noise with a button, but were asked not to press it unless absolutely necessary. None pressed the button, yet the belief they had some sort of control made the noise less distressing to them. They were even more persistent when working on difficult puzzles compared to the control group. In another famous study, nursing home residents on 2 floors were given benefits such as plants in their rooms and 1 movie each week. On one floor, the residents were allowed to choose the plants they wanted, were responsible for watering them, and had to choose which night was movie night. On the other floor, everything was taken care of by the nurses. On the floor with increased control, residents were happier, more active, and more alert. They also had better health and half as many deaths. It's worth striving for control. Next is shame or self-consciousness. Attractive people are not happier than unattractive ones on average, but some improvements in appearance do lead to lasting increases in happiness. People who undergo plastic surgery report high levels of satisfaction with the process, increased quality of life, and decreases in psychiatric symptoms in the years after the procedure. People who undergo these procedures report feelings of self-consciousness every day. Being freed from such a daily burden may lead to a lasting increase in self-confidence and well-being. The next condition is work. Most primates will solve puzzles just for the fun of it, without external motivations. This is also true of humans. When we challenge ourselves, we enter flow, states of intense focus and concentration where we are completely absorbed in a task, and lose our sense of self-consciousness and time. These can occur in a number of activities such as engaging in sports, playing a musical instrument, driving down twisty country roads, or pursuing creative endeavors. It is due to our desire of competence, industry, or mastery, and most people find their flow at work. But many people don't. The key to understanding which jobs are satisfying could be in something called occupational self-direction. People who are more closely supervised in jobs of low complexity and more routine showed the highest degree of alienation. People who had more latitude in deciding how they approached the work that was varied and challenging tended to enjoy it more. People approach their work in one of three ways. Firstly, as a job where they only do it for the money. Secondly, as a career with larger goals of advancement and promotion, which can energize you at times, but at other times leave you wondering why you're working so hard and leave you with the feeling of competing for the sake of competing. Or lastly, they see their work as a calling, where you enter flow multiple times a day and where it is intrinsically fulfilling. It's worth finding work that is intrinsically fulfilling, even if it means a slightly lower salary. But a consistent finding is that being unemployed is highly destructive to one's well-being. Relationships. The condition that is said to trump all others in importance is the strength and number of a person's relationships. Humans are ultra-social creatures. Good relationships make people happy, and happier people enjoy more and better relationships. Having an annoying colleague or roommate or a chronic conflict with your spouse is one of the surest ways to reduce your happiness. You never fully adapt to interpersonal conflict. It damages you every day, even on days when you don't see the other person but ruminate on the conflict nevertheless. If you want to predict how happy someone is or how long they will live for, their social interactions are a huge indicator. Having strong social relations strengthens the immune system, extends life even more than quitting smoking, and speeds recovery from surgery. It also reduces the risk of depression and anxiety disorders. It's not just that extroverts are naturally happier and healthier. When introverts are forced to be more outgoing, they usually enjoy it more and finds that it boosts their mood. Lastly is V for voluntary activities. It includes all the things you choose to do, such as exercise, learn a new skill, or going on holiday. There's a concept in psychology called vital engagement. It encompasses flow, but also includes a deeper sense of meaning and purpose in life, and a connection to something larger than yourself. It can be found through work or other associations, such as religious groups, the army, or volunteer groups. Starting to volunteer or increasing time spent as one can be a sure way to be happier and healthier. Exercise. This one comes as no surprise. Quoting from one study, physical activity was significantly related to life satisfaction and happiness in young, middle-aged, and older adults. I won't go too much into exercise as it's fairly obvious. There is an idea that reasoning and logic is separated into the higher cortical areas of the brain, and emotions are something of our evolutionary past that clouds our judgment. But the frontal lobe enabled a great expansion of emotionality. The lower third of the prefrontal cortex is called the orbital frontal cortex. It has grown particularly large in humans and other primates, and it is one of the most consistently active areas of the brain during emotional reactions. It plays a central role when sizing up a reward or punishment of a situation. The neurons in this area fire wildly in the immediate possibility of pleasure, pain, loss or gain, such as being drawn to a meal or an attractive person, or being repelled by a bad song or a dead animal. When the orbital frontal cortex is damaged, patients lose most of their emotional lives. Instead of feeling emotion, they feel nothing. For example, in scenes of horror or beauty. Their reasoning and logic is still intact though. So when they are free from emotion, do they become hyperlogical with perfect rationality? In fact, it is the complete opposite. They are completely unable to make simple decisions or set goals. When they look out at the world and see dozens of choices, they lack immediate internal feelings of like and dislike. They must examine all the pros and cons of every single choice. But with the lack of emotion, they see little reason to pick one over the other. Human rationality depends critically on sophisticated emotionality. It is only because our emotional brains work so well that our reasoning can work at all. Reason and emotion must both work together to create intelligent behavior, but emotion does most of the work. What is the meaning of life? One psychologist has attempted to answer this question. The answer can be found only by understanding the kind of creature we are. We are shaped by individual selection to be selfish creatures. We are shaped by group selection to be hive creatures and to be part of something larger than ourselves. We are social creatures who need love and attachments, and we are industrious creatures with needs for effectiveness and vital engagement in our work. Therefore, it is worth striving to get the right relationships between yourself and others, between yourself and your work, and between yourself and something larger than yourself.